Zach Osterman from the Indy Star with us now. And Zach, welcome aboard. Thanks. Appreciate you being with us as always.
How we doing?
Cannot complain. Nobody's wanting to listen to that. So I've been talking to other people instead. But talking about Indiana's game last night, I know that a lot of fans was worried and just kind of focusing on some of the negatives. But there are some things that are coming together right now, and I think that's what everybody has to understand. It may take a minute for this stuff to come together, but one thing that is moving in a positive direction is the play of Malik Renew and Khalil Ware, and especially together. I mentioned there was a couple of moments last night, one in which Malik had grabbed a rebound and was coming up the floor, would have given it up to a guard and kind of looked, but no one pressured him. And as he moved forward, he sees the seam and just goes to the basket and dunks it, which was a great move on his. And then later on, he's below the basket, Khalil Ware at the free throw line, and he takes it up over the top to Renew for another basket. Those two guys are playing well together. Khalil Ware has been consistent in every game for Indiana. He has been doing what you would need him to do. Indiana is just a few things away from being a decent team, which it's not that they're not a decent team right now, but I mean, as far as being a good team, Mgbako, when his game, when he finds his lane, that could make this team a challenging opponent.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I understand anybody who's skeptical about where Indiana's at right now, and I'll be honest, I'm probably one of those people, in some respects. What I would say is I don't think it should necessarily have been a surprise to see Indiana maybe struggling a little bit, to see Indiana starting a little bit slowly this year. The question is basically just how far can they come? That's what I would argue is basically just how much ground are they going to be able to make up before they can get to the part of the season where ultimately you kind of have to stop being a work in progress and start putting results on the board. I don't think they're anywhere near that right now. I think there is a plausible future where this stretch kind of they're going through at the moment is good for them long term to sort of maybe not build any false sense of confidence and give them a really sort of, long, hard look at where they need to improve, what needs to get better, etc. I think that you also do see, I would say glimpses and windows. I think there were probably more of them last night, stretches where it seems like Indiana figures it out a little bit, where Indiana sort of realizes, how to put all the pieces in the right places to play the kind of basketball it's capable of. And, to your point about, I wrote about Ware last night, a little bit about Renew too. You do have some of these individuals that you feel like can kind of hold Indiana up for a little while and just kind of give Indiana some anchor points while they try to figure out the wider issues. But I'm also obviously not ignorant of, what Indiana has struggled with, and the fact that Indiana still has a long way to go if it wants to be the kind of team that, that puts together the sort of season that I think it thinks it's capable of.
Yeah, I know it's shocking. Look at the amount of 3-point shots they've given up, not taken, but made. I mean, my gosh, some of these teams are just knocking them down, and there's so much discussion about why this is. And, last night I did the post-game show with Todd Leary, and he believes it's just anticipation, that these guys are not anticipating what they need to be and where they need to be quick enough and getting out on that guy. But there's no question they're leaving guys wide open for shots, and they're more than happy to take those and knock them down as they have. But Indiana's overall game has been so strong that hasn't been enough for anyone to beat them yet. Although that's not a recipe I would recommend for long term, but I think that that's something, hopefully, for Indiana fans that they do get better at, that they reduce that. Also, I think that the size of these teams they're playing is going to change immensely once the schedule changes as well.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you're right. You're gonna, I think that some of the physical matchups are going to be different when you're starting to play teams that will come with bigger, more athletic players, and I think Indiana's still figuring out sort of what it wants to be defensively. Like at the beginning of the season, we saw so much switching from this team, and it seems like already Indiana has backed off of a fair bit of that, which is sort of interesting to me. But I think the big question I just have about this team is basically when it gets into these high major games, and I don't think it necessarily needs to win, against UConn, but can it just kind of stay connected enough defensively? Because right now what happens, like people talk about open threes, but a big part of the reason you're getting open threes is because Indiana is just way too easy to drive on right now. And how many times was Wright State putting a foot in the lane with the ball in their hands? A Wright State player yesterday, and that's what leads to, and it's really easy to, criticize a Mackenzie Mgbako or a Gabe Cups, when Aaron Wellage is wide open again. And it's very possible that they've been told, don't leave your man under any circumstances. And so they're making that mistake. But every instinct in you as a basketball player says if you see your teammate getting collapsed on the drive toward the rim, you dig down to help. And the point is, if you're not getting beat off the dribble, then you shouldn't have as much trouble guarding the 3-point line. So I just think that generally speaking, this team, again, we knew, and people like you and me said all off season, they're going to be a work in progress. It's going to be slow. It's going to be ugly at points. It's a different experience to have to live that than to just sort of acknowledge that it's a possibility. But I think what I'm most curious about as we do start to see Indiana in some of these more high major games is, essentially, can you almost learn on the fly a little bit? And once you sort of see, okay, this is what it looks like when we play the kind of teams that we're going to need to beat if we want to get to where we want to go. That's what I'm trying to say. Do things change? Because I think, realistically, yes, you can say, well, these, there won't be so many smaller guard-oriented matchups and yada, yada, yada. But the flip side is you'll be dealing with teams that are bigger, more athletic, more refined in their offensive process, and more capable of hurting you if you get broken down the way Indiana has.
Yeah, and there's some other things. They got out rebounded last night by that team, which that's something that definitely has to be fixed. Woody mentioned it. I think he got one rebound from the guards, and I didn't know that stat, but I mentioned earlier that they're not getting a ton of rebounds from the guards, and I don't know what that's going to take for them. Are they standing around a little bit more? I haven't paid attention to that, but everybody has to be involved, and that's the one thing I'm not sure that everyone is always involved all the time.
Yeah, I mean it's tricky. First of all, on the sly, Indiana was not great rebounding the ball last year. They had an opponent rebounding rate of 29%, which was 205th in the country, according to Ken Pomeroy. So, which
is amazing considering the bigs that they had and have this year.
And they were solid in that number. opponent offensive rebounding percentage is what percentage of available offensive rebounds does your opponent secure. So basically, how good are you at clearing the glass? They were pretty good at it in Woodson's first year. They were 64th in the country, but that was also, frankly, a season when Indiana really kind of just had to grind games out, did not want to play fast at all. And it's not like they were playing super fast by the end of last season. They were 145th in adjusted tempo. But they clearly want to play faster this season, and I understand why. It's not just because transition offense is better than half-court offense. It's also because of, the extent to which when you have Khalil Ware, Mgbako, Xavier Johnson, Trey Galloway, CJ Gunn, Caleb Banks, those are big, long, athletic bodies, flooding toward the rim. And it's not by accident that if we talk about something Indiana's done well over these first 3 games, they're 6th in the country in free throw rate. They're shooting free throws at a remarkable rate right now. And again, some of that is the matchups, but some of it is also, I think, proof of Indiana's aggressiveness offensively. And I bring all that up to say, number one, Indiana wasn't a great rebounding team last year. So there may be some things that, some systemic things that carry over from one to the other. And number two, if you want to run, that's great, but that means that you need to send bodies up the floor. And if you have everybody coming back to crash the glass to secure the rebound, and listen, a coach said this to me a long time ago, if you can't rebound, you can't defend, because if you can't rebound and you can't close out possessions, then you can't talk about how well you played in defense until you actually finish the possession and start back down the floor. But if you want to run, you can't send 4 guys to the glass. So, and if you're a team that, both because of your defensive profile and the ways that teams don't want to attack you, and also because of maybe teams' willingness to be a little bit more aggressive from behind the 3-point line, you're a team that's going to deal with a lot more long rebounds than normal because teams are going to take more jumpers and more threes. That's tricky. I mean, that is a relatively narrow needle to thread between saying we need to be a better rebounding team, but also saying, well, we need to be a better rebounding team. We need our guards to do the rebounding. We're going to be giving up more long rebounds just by virtue of the way we play and the virtue of the way opponents are probably going to approach us. But also we want to run, which means we need to send bodies down the floor. But if you're sending bodies down the floor, then that means you're probably going to be outnumbered securing the ball. It's tricky.
Yeah, and then they haven't had much problems with this yet so far this year, especially through preseason injury bugs. Last night, X went down late in the game with, I'm just guessing, it looked from my distance like what you would call a high ankle sprain. Watching the replays, it looked like he stepped on the opponent high.
Yeah, I think he stepped up.
So I don't think it's a serious injury, but it's one of those that could keep him out of a game. I'm not predicting that he's in or out because I don't know. And if he can't go, of course, it's going to be Gabe Cupps that steps into that position. And that's a lot to throw at him, although Gabe Cupps has shown that he is not your typical freshman. But getting your first start at Madison Square Garden would certainly be something memorable.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously, again, sort of the athletic challenge of a team like UConn. I also just think that the other thing, frankly, Indiana's just – I don't think Indiana's deep enough at guard right now to feel like you can lose any one of those guys for an extended period of time. And – hey, sometimes necessity is the mother of invention. Sometimes, taking a guy out of the lineup. I mean, we saw that a little bit last year with Jalen Hood-Schifino, that elevated Hood-Schifino's performance. But it is, I mean, it's tricky. If you can't, if you're going to the Garden without Xavier Johnson, that is, I mean, just to be honest, that is problematic.
Yeah. And we won't find that out until later. but that's certainly something to keep an eye on. Trey Galloway continues to be a someone who is contributing, but I still think they need him to contribute. His points, he's able to get them in a lot of ways, and a lot of those I call them junk points, but I don't mean that in a negative way. Last night he turned I used the phrase turning lemons into lemonade. He fumbled a pass, was able to get it back, took it away from a defender, and took it to the rim. But from a shooting standpoint, he was 3 of 7 overall, 1 of 4 from behind the 3-point line, but he got to the free throw line a lot, shot 80% there. Very important in that regard. So he's getting to the free throw line, and that's important for IU guards.
Yeah, he's also averaging 3.7 assists per game, which is really good. Actually, quietly, if you look at assist rates.
Wow, 6 assists last night.
Yeah, if you look at the tempo free numbers, Xavier Johnson's got the same assist rate as Khalil Ware and a lower assist rate than Trey Galloway and Malik Renew. And obviously you don't expect that to last, but I think that tells you that Indiana's comfortable putting the ball in Galloway's hands to make more plays, and that he's not just sort of an auxiliary point guard or ball handler the way he maybe had been at times in the last couple of years. He's still averaging 12 points per game. He's drawing 5.1 fouls per game, which is a really good number for a guy that, is good and athletic and is going to put the ball on the floor, but he's not, he's not Romeo Langford. He's not Eric Gordon, where there's just sort of, if he wants to bull his way to the rim, you just can't stop him. I think that it's his aggressiveness and his activity that are giving him kind of his opportunities. Obviously you need him to find his 3-point shot, but he's 2 of 7. So it's one of those things where it's kind of like, well, you say, he's shooting 28.6%, but if one more of those threes had gone in, he'd be shooting close to 43%. I think more than that, what you need is to try and see if you can find a way to get him a little bit more volume than basically 2 attempts a game. But I don't know. I think he's been fine. I think he's, I think he and Johnson are the 2 players that have sort of tried to hold their hands up most in terms of taking responsibility for stuff. But yeah, 11 assists to 5 turnovers through his first 3 games, couple steals. Last night was actually the first game where he was whistled for a foul, which is pretty remarkable. I think the 2 things that probably Indiana need to come around with him are the 3-point shooting and like Mike Woodson talked about, and you mentioned the guard rebounding.
Yeah, the 3-point shooting again between Trey Galloway and Mgbako, they go 2 for 11, and those are the 2 guys they need to knock those shots down. McKenzie, we've talked about, he's still I don't know if I want to use the word struggling, but adjusting. That was only his 3rd collegiate game since coming out of high school, and I think he's still making that adjustment to the speed of the game because he's been practicing against Indiana practice players up until now. And so he needs to find a rhythm. I think he just hasn't found his rhythm yet. Once he does, that's a component that this team that I think will take this team up a notch.
You're talking about Mgbako?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, sorry. I thought I got confused between him and I thought he looked a lot better last night. And I thought, obviously, the numbers bear that out to some extent. He had 13 points, 5 rebounds, a couple assists. I just thought he had a better sense for where to find his points, I guess. And frankly, I think listen, some of this is going to be his defense and his energy and all that kind of stuff. And Mike Woodson has not been shy about saying that out loud. Some of it is, to be fair to Mgbako, Indiana needing to understand better how to get him involved. And this is one of those many things that there are just layers on layers of things that it should not be surprising Indiana's not great at right now. And one of them is Indiana's never had a player like this. Not under Mike Woodson anyway, a player that, is kind of the true, the old sort of basketball cliche of the corner man that can run off screens, can get downhill, that's too big to be guarded by a guard, but too athletic to be guarded by a true forward. you think of some of the players Indiana struggled with in the recent past. Your Murray twins, your Johnny Davises, your Ron Harper Juniors. When was the last time Indiana had a player like that? Victor Oladipo kind of becomes that, but he's more of a true guard than maybe you call it a wing. Romeo Langford, I think at times played that way, but it was never consistent. Of course, he was injured. I think Indiana's still figuring out how to get Mgbako involved. And I think last night you saw maybe the player look a little bit more comfortable with, saying, this is how I fit. And you saw the team maybe look a little bit more comfortable with, hey, this is how we get him in rhythm. And this is how we get him, get the shots he needs to get. 1 of 7 from 3 obviously isn't great, but I think his history tells you, he's probably going to make a couple more of those. And they were, I think for the most part, at least I haven't watched it back yet, but for the most part, I think those were good shots. And it's kind of one of those where, you're reminded of the fine margins on these things. If 2 of those threes go in, then he's 3 of 7. He's 5 of 9 from the field, and he scores 19 points on 9 shots. And, one of the things we're talking about today is, wow, look at Mackenzie Mgbako, 19 points on 9 shots, made some threes, finally looked like he was comfortable and in rhythm with, kind of where the offense needed him to be. He's got to keep improving, no doubt, but I think it was encouraging to see not just him play better and maybe show a little bit more understanding of kind of how he fit and where best he fit in the offense, but also it looked like Indiana was more comfortable sort of figuring out where to get him the ball.